We've been talking about the type of dates we eat when we break our fast in Ramadan. So, iftar, buka time. And I need to sort of give some feedback when we do the Joburg to Kaap start crossing coming up just now. So I need your advice. I need your help. I need you to teach me a thing or two because I don't quite know. I just eat it and I enjoy it. But I'm not a connoisseur of understanding the differences. Okay, the WhatsApp voice line, text or voice 061 766 0355. You tell me what are the dates if you rank them from 1 to 5. Which ones would you put at 1, what at 5, and why, so that I know that and we can share that information as well. Just now, let's talk about information of a different sort about safety in the mosques, in particular during Ramadan. Right? Last year we were all shut down. This is not the case this year, but what does it mean in terms of safety? Dr. Shoyab Waadee with me. He's a nephrologist and physician, but in the context of this discussion, he's the vice president of the IMA, which is the Islamic Medical Association. Shoyab, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thanks, Ashraf. Thanks for the invitation.
Okay, so you're all kitted out, ready to do work for another day, right?
Yeah, I sleep in this. Ashraf. This is my pajamas.
Well, I understand that now. I know, right? Perhaps you need to. Are you concerned about people frequenting the mosques now? Some of the mosques with strict social distancing, others definitely not so. Is that a concern from a medical point of view for you?
So I think we have to understand that there's a few things that we learned over the past 18 months or 16 months in this pandemic. And one of the things that we've learned, one of the hardest lessons that we've learned is that there's a lot we don't know. And there's a lot of information which is not clear to us about how the virus spreads under different circumstances. The masjid obviously represents an indoor space where people are together, especially in Ramadan, for a long period of time, and may represent a space where the virus can spread amongst individuals like many other spaces, shopping malls, taxis, theaters, anything like that. Obviously, we at a situation currently in South Africa where our pandemic is at a relatively low level. We've got a sort of endemic level of infection which is spreading through the community very slowly. The current test positivity rate is at around 4%, and the number of active cases which are sort of formally reported or who are officially reported is just over 20,000. And if you multiply that even several fold, that means that if you're in a crowd of 1,000 people, there's probably one person who's likely to be positive in that crowd in South Africa at the moment. So that's a fairly low rate. And if you adhere to the government regulations of restricting indoor gatherings to 250 people, that means there's like a quarter chance. Of one person being positive, a 0.25% chance of one person being positive.
So that's good news for now, and we are aware that things can change. And
that's good news.
But we don't really know what's going to happen next, right? Yeah. But therefore, I remember last year the Islamic Medical Association were very clear in prescribing or recommending what needs to be happening in the mosques. I noticed an absence of clear directive this time around. Have I missed something?
So the reason is the directives haven't changed. And the directives are recommended worldwide by all authorities for almost every activity, even including taxis and other things which are not adhering to those activities. So the problem is you can't keep issuing directives again and again and again and expect adherence to change. The directives are the same. The directives are that you social distance in the masjid, that you wear a mask, that you sanitize or clean your hands, and that sick and vulnerable people should be protected. Especially if you're ill, you should stay at home and perform your salah at home. If you're old and vulnerable and at particularly high risk, you may also want to perform your salah at home, or you may want to be protected within the masjid, maybe in an area which is particularly well ventilated away from others. So those recommendations still exist. But what I was trying to get at is that there's a significant element of lockdown fatigue. And make no mistake about it, I think if you believe, Zweli Mkhize, that we'll be vaccinated by March next year, I think you're probably a bit highly optimistic. I think in South Africa, it's that we're going to be living with this virus in some extent for 3 or 4 years. And there's no way it's humanly possible for us to adhere to every single restriction which is put on all the time. I think we have to be nuanced. At this time, I would actually personally, and this is not an IMA directive, this is not even come from government, I wouldn't have a problem with people reading shoulder to shoulder in the masjid right now. The risk is extremely small if you wear a mask, clean your hands, and if you're not sick and you don't come to the masjid. If you're sick and you don't come to the masjid at that time. And if the masjid is well ventilated. So I think that's another thing which masjid should concentrate on. They need to make sure, we know we're getting into winter, but our winters are not northern hemisphere frozen winters. It's possible.
Okay, so let's understand this. So the mosques, but some mosques have absolute social distancing, like almost 1.5 meters between two musalla spaces. Others are doing a hybrid of both. One side social distance, other shoulder to shoulder, and others are going shoulder to shoulder only. Right? Are you saying, well, from a personal point of view and from an IMA point of view, are you saying you're fine with that?
So, look, the problem is that situation has not arisen from a lack of medical guidance. The medical authorities around the world and governments are clear. They're all saying the same thing when you go in social distance. That arises from our differences in opinion from an Islamic perspective. Remember, there are people who believe that social distancing is haram and invalidates your salah, and therefore for them, you must reach shoulder to shoulder. At this time, as I said, I think the risk is small. It's difficult to be evangelical right now in South Africa and say, you're killing other people if you're reading shoulder to shoulder at the moment. But certainly when we're in the midst of a wave, for example, if we had a situation where we have widespread community spread as they have in India now, or as they have in some places in Europe, then I think it will be much more important to put the message
then that
out.
will change, yeah. So I mean, the last thing, is it not that important then to maintain the preventative aspect to ensure that it doesn't spike once again by keeping keeping apart as opposed to being shoulder to shoulder?
So I think that's what we as authorities have to sort of notice. We can't have a hard line stand for every single. You have to have a flexible stand in terms of the regulations. So, for example, we have to open up the economy and so forth and so on now because our country needs the economy. People will argue that, it's safer to keep the mosque closed for 2 or 3 years, but that would clearly be patently ridiculous for the majority of Muslims, you understand? So you can't be hyper vigilant. You have to find a balance between hyper vigilance and vigilance and what's happening in reality in the community at the moment. So I think
the last thing is I certainly tend not to greet people with their hands. If you meet me, I will still do the hand on the heart style because I just like that Eturul style. Let's put it that way. What's your thoughts on that? Because I do see many people in the mosques actually greeting with their hands, some hugging and embracing each other, and I don't mean husband and wife or father and son. I'm talking about people meeting other people, like me and you meeting, but we know each other, but we don't live in the same house.
Yes, so I agree. I think you shouldn't be shaking hands at the moment. So there's a difference between standing next to somebody and having direct contact, shaking hands. We know that the virus is spreading that way very easily. If you're standing next to each other, it's also much safer to be wearing a mask, and that's probably a bigger problem that I have. That even those who are standing shoulder to shoulder have abandoned wearing masks. So you almost have a situation where not wearing a mask and standing shoulder to shoulder becomes an article of faith, like the 7th kalima or the 8th kalima. If you believe in Allah Ta'ala, you will not wear a mask and you will stand shoulder to shoulder and you will shake hands. So it almost becomes an article of faith in South Africa. And I must be honest with you and frank with you, I blame our ulama for not, and obviously this is because they're not united, and this reflects the disunity in our society. I mean, this is not around the world that people are social distancing, that people are masking up. But obviously, we have conflated certain issues, which probably should not be conflated together.
Which I take that IMA can advise, but you're powerless to act on. Okay, let's leave it at that. Dr. Shoyab Waadee, thank you for your time. The Vice President of the Islamic Medical Association. As you heard at the back end of it all, there are differences of opinions, and that plays out in the mosque in terms of social distancing and the lack thereof. We'll be crossing, Joburg to Kaapstad in a moment.